this video, we're going to talk about probably the most common short game question I get, which is what's the difference between chipping and pitching, and what do I need to do differently with those techniques? So the main thing before we get into the technique stuff, which I will go over in some good detail toward the end of this video, let's talk about the strategy for chipping and pitching. And a lot of people think of chipping is around the green, pitching is farther away from the green, and I don't mind that. We can even talk about pitching would be higher up in the air, carrying the ball farther, landing it closer to the hole, and chipping would be getting it on the green as quickly as possible and letting it roll out. We could even think of it that way, but I also like to think of it as a spin. The goal with a pitch or a chip shot, which right here I have about a 30-yard shot away from this green. If I'm going to chip, I do want to get it on the green as quickly as possible, get it rolling as quickly as possible, but I want to keep the spin off of that. And I'm going to keep the spin off this ball by using a lower lofted club. So if I can imagine, as I take loft off this club using maybe a 9-iron, it's going to be less and less backspin that's transferred into the ball. So if I'm using a 9-iron here, I could probably use an 8-iron. Some people will even use as low as a 7-iron when they're chipping. My goal is to get that ball getting on the green, rolling as quickly as possible, and then really rolling out. It's not bad for one of the first chips of the day. The goal there again, take the spin off, get it on the green as quickly as possible, let it roll as far as possible. Now that's a chip. That's the goal with the chip. I think it takes the least amount of technical skill to successful chips. It's really just more about managing the speed. You don't have to get too fancy with the spin and different things when you're doing a chip, and I'll go over that here in a little bit. But now when we're doing a pitch, we have a different goal. This time I'm trying to carry the ball as close to the hole as possible, use the maximum amount of spin that I can get, and then to really get that to stop close to the green. Now, that's going to be really handy, and a lot of the best players in the world are phenomenal pitch shot players, create tons of spin on the ball because it gives you a lot of options. Maybe with this shot, I can chip, I can pitch, I could even putt if I really wanted to, if my chipping and pitching was really struggling. But let's imagine there's a bunker in the way that I have to carry and then stop it really quickly. Let's imagine that there's some kind of obstacle where I need to stop it really quickly. That's going to get really difficult to do if I'm trying to bump and around a 7-iron. So with the pitch shot, I have to use a lofted club. Here I have a 60 degree, that's going to get you the most spin. If I use a 56, that's also going to get a lot of spin, but that's really your two options for a pitch, 56 or 60. You could maybe get away with a gap wedge and still create some spin. Another thing to keep in mind here, if I try to pitch this shot today with the dew on the ground, it's going to be really difficult to get much spin on it. So that ball just kind of rolled up the face because it's wet out here. That's going a little bit higher. If I get I'll try to dry off the club and the ball and see if I can get the best quality shot here. But it's really important to realize when there's water on the ground, it's going to be next to impossible to get really high spin rates. And what happens is the water gets between the ball and the club face, and the metal on the club face won't grab that ball. So the grooves, more than anything, they actually just get rid of the water and help you to get more spin that way. Or if there's any debris, maybe if you're in the rough, you're not going to get very much spin. Anytime there's anything between the ball and the face, it's going to be very difficult to get that high spin pitch shot. But again here, the overall goal is I'm going to carry that ball as far as possible. I'm going to get it to spin as much as possible. And that's got a ton of spin. I just hit it too hard. But you can see how that one checked up really quickly as it's up there. So that's the overall differences. A chip, get it on the ground as quickly as possible, take off as much spin as possible, and I'm going to do that with a lower lofted club. A pitch, I'm carrying the ball as far as possible, close to the pin. I'm trying to get the absolute maximum amount of spin that I can, and I'm using a higher lofted club to make that happen. Can't really hit a successful high spinning pitch shot, the kind of one hop and stop shot that you hear a lot of pros talk about. If we're using a 7, 8, 9, even a pitching wedge, just not going to get the spin on it. So now that we know the difference of what the goal is, let's talk about what are the details. And this is really where we can get good at this. So with a chip shot first, again, lower lofted club using a 9-iron, I'm going to go ahead and have my feet pretty close together. And really with any of these shots, whether it's a chip or a pitch, I'm not going to have it too far behind my front foot. So if it's my chip shot, maybe call it a club head width behind my front foot, my lead foot. My feet are maybe 2.5 club head widths apart. So I'm making this a narrower stance. That way I feel like I can rotate a little bit easier. I do want to rotate my body, so as I'm coming back and through, the overall motion is very little wrist. I have a little bit of forward shaft lean to take the loft off, and then from there, I'm going to rotate my body back and through. You'll notice my knees start to pivot around as I come into my follow through. With this shot, I'm not going to get a whole lot of wrist set in the backswing. So I'm not going to get a lot of wrist action. I'm not trying to get a lot of speed and zip at the bottom of the swing. I'm actually trying to take that speed away, get the spin off the shot. And as I come on through, I think one of the most important things is I want to keep this nice and flat. As you get into more advanced pitch shot techniques, so not chip but pitch, then you could start to fold up that wrist, but I think that brings in some inconsistency. You got to be really good with your hands, practice a lot to get good at that. What I want to do is make things as easy as possible so they're kind of bulletproof when the pressure gets on. And if I can keep that left wrist nice and flat as I'm doing that and let that pivot around, finish here, then that's going to make things a lot easier. I don't have to get, because of the lower lofted club, I don't have to get a ton of forward shaft lean because it's already got low loft on it. I'm just thinking about letting that club, or the bounce of the club, kind of skip on the turf right where the ball is, and I'm just staying nice and soft with my hands. So it's okay to get a tiny bit of wrist set. I can do this a little bit, but I just don't want to get all kinds of it. I don't need it when I'm just getting this ball to roll. So it's almost a little bit like a putting stroke. The only major difference with a putting stroke versus this is that my knees are going to pivot. In a putting stroke, I'm going to stay really still with my lower body, and I'm going to go like this. My knees aren't going to move. With this chip shot, I'm going to let my knees pivot a little bit, and that's going to allow me to rotate on through. That's going to keep my wrist from breaking down. If my knees don't pivot and I try to swing through, my wrist is going to break down. If my knees pivot, now my body, my hips, my torso, my arms, my hands, everything's working together as a unit, and that's allowing that to stay very nice and connected in there. So if I do those things, it's going to make it very easy to get that clean contact and get the ball rolling, well. So last thing here, I'm going to favor my left side. I'm probably going to have about 60% of my weight on my left side, and I'm going to feel like I keep it there the entire time. In reality, there is a little bit of weight shift, but I don't think that's the feeling that you're going to have when you're out there. You're just going to feel like it's on the left side the entire time. So to recap, feet closer together, weights on the left side, ball is maybe a club head width or so behind my lead foot. If I was to widen my stance, so if my feet are close together, that's a great ball position, because now it's kind of centered over my sternum, and my sternum is just staying over top of the ball the entire time. If I was to have a wider stance like this, that would be too far forward, because now my sternum is back here. I want to keep the middle of my body over the ball and just rotate back and through as I'm hitting the shot. So that's my ball position. Using a low lofted club, a little bit of forward shaft lean is fine. Let those knees pivot, and let's finish with this nice flat left wrist. So let's get that ball to roll as quickly as possible and get it on the green to where just make things easy. So that's the lowest technique shot, so you don't have to have tons of skill and technique to make that happen. All you got to do is just keep things simple, back and through, get that ball on the ground and run. Now with the pitch shot, I need a little bit more skill, because to get that spin, some things have to happen really well. To take spin off, you really don't have to do anything special. You just don't mess anything up, just let it rotate back and through. But to get spin on the shot, I need to have a really good angle on this club face. I need to have a really good bite between the club face and the ball, and I really have to create a lot of speed here at impact, but use a high enough lofted club to where it doesn't go so far. So things are a little bit more advanced, I guess I would say. My rule of thumb is, if you can pitch, I would prefer you pitch. And when I used to do some clinics, when I first started doing clinics, and you'd be in front of 15 or 20 people and you're doing these demonstrations, the last thing you want to do is completely chunk one or lay the sod over it. And as a player, I always like to pitch it because you got a lot more spin on there and it's cooler, it checks up by the hole. But when I got in front of a lot of people, I realized it's a whole lot easier to chip. You're not going to mess up as many. But if you have the skill to make it happen and you practice a good amount, you can hit that one hop and stop that really good spin shot. So with this one, again, I'm going to use my 60 degree here today. I think you pretty much need to use that or your 56. The difference here is there's a lot of loft on this club. I can take some loft off and it's still going to have plenty of loft on it. When I get that extra forward shaft lean, what that allows me to do is that allows me to release the club a little easier, and that allows me to be a little bit more consistent because now my hands are more in front of the golf ball. I'm also, the difference with a chip and a pitch, I'm going to use about the same stance and setup, but on my backswing, I'm going to go ahead and let those wrists set a little bit. So I'm going to let those wrists cock. As I come down, I have to be really certain that I don't catch a whole lot of ground. I'm going to hit down and through the ball, but I need to hit that ball first contact and be a little slight bit lower on the face. That way it's really clean. There's nothing between the face and the ball. As I come on through, I can still get that flat left wrist as I come around, but I'm really feeling like I'm accelerating. Everything is really accelerating quickly through the ball to get that extra spin and extra grab on it. And I'm going to carry it a lot farther, which is why I'm swinging harder, but I'm going to let the spin grab it and stop it. So to recap on this pitch shot, same ball position as a chip. You can move it around a little bit, that's okay, forward or back, to fine tune it for yourself. That same overall ball position is fine. I'm going to get a little bit more forward shaft lean at contact because I have this higher lofted club. It's going to allow me to be more consistent. The ball is going to come out a little lower than it would with if I just use the chipping technique with a 60, but it's still going to come out plenty high. So I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to let those wrists hinge a little bit more and then really accelerate on through there. I feel like I'm very aggressive with my knees, getting everything to accelerate, getting that club to come on through, but I'm not breaking down this left wrist. If I break down that left wrist, I'm going to start adding more loft. The ball will go higher, but it won't spin as much when I do that. It'll be more of a flop shot, not a full-on flop, but it'll just be kind of a lofted. This shot is going to be lower with more spin to stop it. So that's the things I'm focusing on. So let me go ahead and try a few here, see if I can get some clean contact even though the ground's a little bit wet. We'll see if we can get them to bite a little bit more. That one I just need to be a little bit more aggressive with to get the spin on there. We'll see if I can get one setting up to where I don't get any water between the club face and the ball, and we'll be able to get it to grab slightly more. But notice when we landed those first shots, we're probably on the front third of the green, or the front third if we broke it into quadrants from the flag to the front edge. Front third, middle third, back third. I'm going to land these almost to the back third, really aggressive through there, and you're going to notice they're going to spin a decent amount. That was a great one there, all the way to the back third, and then you saw that really checked up a lot. So again, the difference there, setting my wrist a little bit more, I'm much more aggressive. I'm really trying to come down and be aggressive through that ball, generate a lot of speed. I'm letting the loft on the club get the spin for me, even though I'm de-lofting it. That forward shaft lean allows you to get that perfect angle with your club face to get the spin. Plus it gives you more consistency because now my hands are leading and they're in front. And then lastly, I'm going to make sure that everything as it comes around, that still stays nice and flat. That way I can be consistent.